I'd like to welcome all of you to the third session at the Charbagh stage. I'd like to request my volunteers to ensure there's nobody standing in the middle, so all the aisles are empty. Some people have left their bags, or in the previous session they left their bags on the chair and they weren't around for about half an hour. We'd like it if you guys were not going to be in a session for more than a few minutes. Like if you're not stepping out for a call or a water break or something, please take your bag with you. Don't leave your bags unattended. If anybody wants water, there's a dispenser at the end of this garden area on the left. And if anybody wants a medical kit for any reason, please reach out to us or any of the volunteers that you can see. Okay, people are settling in. We shall start soon. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, namaskar, adab. Welcome to the 16th edition of the Jaipur Literature Festival, protected by Dettol, Banega Swasth India, at Bank of Baroda, Charbagh. We are delighted to introduce Age of Vice. The new star of thriller writing, Deepti Kapoor's new novel, Age of Vice, has all ingredients necessary for the perfect thriller. Loved, loathed, and feared, the Wadia family is at the prime of luxury until an accident launches them in a rabbit hole of violence, revenge, and destruction. It discusses the recipe for creating an action-packed narrative while revealing the contrasting worlds of dusty UP villages and the urban life of New Delhi. Can I please have Deepti Kapoor and Marlon James on stage? Deepti Kapoor is the author of two novels, Age of Vice and A Bad Character. Age of Vice, forthcoming from Riverhead in January 2023, is currently being translated into 20 languages and is in development for a TV series with FX Disney. Marlon James's first novel in his series, Black Leopard, Red Wolf, was a finalist for the 2019 National Book Award. His previous novel, A Brief History of Seven Killings, was the winner of the 2015 Man Booker Prize, the American Book Award, and the Anisfield-Wolf Book Prize for fiction. Over to you.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Thank you, guys. Congratulations on the book coming out.
Thank you, Marlon. It's just such a pleasure to be to have you as an early supporter. It feels like you're my mascot. Can I say that?
I just realized I still had this on. I must look like a complete jerk on stage.
I was wondering. I was gonna say. I was gonna go back and get my glasses.
I just realized. It's funny. I was certainly thrilled by this novel, which is an understatement, but I don't know if I'd call it a thriller.
No, I wouldn't call it a thriller either.
But I do think that it is a novel that is definitely trying to come to grips with crime. And can we talk about that? When did you know that crime itself was going to be a centerpiece of this?
So I think what I was trying to do, and all of this was revealed to me while I was writing it.
Right.
So it was this idea of, I don't read lots of crime genre thrillers myself, and I wanted to use the tropes and conventions of a thriller in order to create something larger and stranger and more unstable. I think instability is a really important word to me. Instability, an unstable world that reflects the current times that we live in. And crime, this is how I came to that is this kind of really long, circuitous route, is that I had an idea to write a sort of Delhi Gatsby.
Yeah.
Or even a Less Than Zero. I hung out with a lot of...
It's weird how that always happens.
Yeah.
You start out trying to write one novel and it ends up being something completely different.
Yeah, exactly. So what... I was figuring out what to do after my first novel came out. A couple of ideas I had were rejected. And, well, you know, my agent at the time said, you know, just, you're always telling me these outrageous stories of all these rich people you used to hang out with. Just write about them. So I thought, okay. And from there, and then, well, the whole, like, this is what I'm going to do, write about rich people, I realized was very similar to my first novel. And then I started to think I also needed to pay the bills.
Right.
If I want to exist and survive as a professional writer, I need to sell. Can't write like strange novels, little novels all the time. So what if I started with a car crash?
Right.
And what if the wrong person is blamed and goes to jail? And what if there's this criminal family which sort of exists in that gray area between being gangsters and businessmen, and they are, you know, responsible for whatever's happening. And what if there's the son of the boss who wants to do his own thing, and you have a sort of a journalist who's curious and naive and morally compromised. And those were the early seeds, and then from there, that was one part of it, and then the other part was realizing that, you know, I was very interested in the processes of corruption. I wanted to look into corruption and crime, because crime just, in UP specifically, where some of the novel is based, crime does feed the large amounts of money that's made.
Right.
And it was just really interesting to look at the corruption, power, abuse of power, its relationship with politics, with crime, with influence, with journalism. I mean, if you know, modern India today is about corruption, morality, family, religion, and crime. So it just felt like all those themes came together.
Yeah, it's funny because it also felt to me like a Jamaican novel.
Right.
And it felt like a Sri Lankan novel. It felt like certainly like a Mexican novel. And a lot of times, you know, I remember reading Jessica Hagedorn's novel Dog Eaters, which is set in the Philippines. And I remember thinking, you know, reading it, this is the greatest novel about Jamaica I've ever read. But it's set in the Philippines. And one of the things I always thought about the craziness of that novel and of where I come from, you always feel like you're in the middle of a gang assassination, a political election, and a beauty contest.
Yeah.
All at the same time.
Yeah.
It makes me wonder, you know, how much of this novel did you know of, like, before you really got into writing it?
Well, how much of the novel, or how much of the world?
How much of the work? Yeah, because, like, I know when I was writing Brief History, like you, I started out trying to write my shortest novel. You know, I tried to write a novella.
Really well. That worked out really well.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
It's a weirdo trying to write a short book always ends up being the reverse. But the reason why it ended up being long is when I was at, say, page 50, there's no way I could tell you what would have eventually happened on page 600.
Right.
And I wonder if that is one of the things that happened with this novel, where it almost, not necessarily got out of control from you, but became such a thing you weren't even expecting.
Oh, yeah. I mean, my process of writing is quite chaotic and unpredictable. So I started, like you, I started knowing what the start would be. I knew the main characters, and they were all inspired by people I've met. But then once you create those characters, it's like a little bit like artificial intelligence. You're running the program, and then the characters become sentient and start to do their own thing.
They become their own people.
Yeah, and then you're just like running after them and trying to control them and figure out what's going on, and just trying to like bring them back into the fold. And it just grows and grows and grows from there.
Yeah.
So you know, I don't know if how many people have read the novel, but you know, introducing a kind of main character right in the third act is certainly, I mean, now that I think of it, is maybe not the conventional thing to do. But he just, Sunil Risto, he just came to me, and then I had to deal with him. I had to like insert him into the novel, and then I had to like manipulate everything else around him, and it was just something I have to do. I can't. It's almost like your rational self is working against your subconscious, and you're trying to like figure out the way between.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird how that happens when you're actually your characters become people and they stop taking crap from you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I compare it to basically being a journalist for Imagine People.
Yeah.
That you're really, after a while, you're just barely hanging on as a writer. You're just along for the ride.
Yeah. And when that happens, it's amazing, right?
Yeah.
When that moment comes.
Was it ever scary though?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I won't lie. Towards the end, very scary.
Yeah.
But I was also, I remembered when I was finishing the manuscript,
Right.
I was trying to send it to Frankfurt in time for Frankfurt. I suddenly got a job. I used to do freelance journalism, and I suddenly got an offer to go and basically drive around Lisbon and drink wine for a travel magazine. And that was a week before I had to hand in the manuscript.
Hey, work is work.
Yeah, I took it. And anyway, it's occasionally very scary, but it can also be very joyous.
Yeah. I'm curious if you remember which character appeared to you first, or who did you start with first?
Yeah, okay. Well, I think I started with Neda, because the journalist.
Why did I think you were going to say AJ?
No.
Oh, yeah?
Ajay came.
Ajay, right.
Yeah, when I got to Ajay, that's when I had my novel.
Oh.
Right? So I started with Neda.
Okay, scratches a third of these questions. Go on.
Because Neda is a core of me. She's a
Right.
journalist, but I was a journalist in my 20s, and I sort of transplanted my...
See, I was resisting asking that.
Oh.
Like, how much of you being a journalist affected your journalist character?
Well, everyone's been asking that question. Why are you being
I don't wanna
sensitive?
be everybody.
Oh, no. Well, there you go. You're not everybody, so yeah. She has a core of me, but the excessive driving and working life, the rest of her is made up.
Right.
I came from a scrappier family, more conservative. I gave her
Right.
cool parents. I gave her an amazing address in Delhi. So, just it's always interesting to put something of you in your characters, because there's a
Right.
degree of exposure which I find very interesting as a writer. And then Sunny,
Right.
based on lots of young boys and men that I've known. And then I remember the novel wasn't there,
Right.
I was thinking about how to structure it, what to do, and I met a young boy in the mountains who inspired the character of Ajay.
Right.
And he had a story of loss, but he was full of hope and optimism. He had been sent by his family to work. And then I took him, this young boy, and the young men that I used to see working in these private mansions in Delhi, and when that character came together, when Ajay came together,
Right.
that's really when I could start working on the novel. So in a way, I could say Ajay was the first character.
Right. Is he? I'm wondering if he's kind of the soul of the novel, because he eventually becomes pretty brutal and efficient and really an instrument of destruction, but in a weird way, he never loses his innocence.
Yeah.
And I wondered if he was kind of like the soul of the book.
Yeah, I think so. What do you, I mean, this is because he is the sort of, he's the only, despite the violence and everything, he is the only one in a way who's incorruptible.
Right.
But his loyalty to Sunny and his identification with him, it proves to be his undoing. So. There's a kind of emptiness in Ajay, and then because he has no identity, and when he ties his identity to that of Sunny, there is a very real danger of him becoming corrupted by Sunny's corruption. So that's what I wanted to work with. But do you think he's still the soul of the novel, despite everything towards the end, despite his violence? What do you? I'm always interested to know what you think.
I mean, I'm always the wrong person to ask because I write so much violence.
Yeah.
So
There you go.
So I can have somebody kill tons of people and still be the soul of a book. I think because in in a way, because he is so shaped by outside forces and other people, that there's a part of me when I'm reading this, and this is not spoiling the novel because I don't think this may happen in a sequel, that the day he looks in the mirror and actually recognizes himself, this world is going to explode.
Yeah, that's what I'm working on. Yeah.
Oh, we should point out that this is the first of three novels,
So-
and I'm assuming most of the characters, quite a few of the characters, will reappear.
Oh yeah, of course.
In the
Yeah,
following
yeah.
volumes. Speaking of, violence, what is your approach to writing that? And I said as somebody who gets into all sorts of crap over violence
I know.
all the time.
So, I'm interested in systems of violence more than violence.
Right.
And what perpetuates violence. And I find it really hard to write violent acts as a writer. I just think I don't have the ability to write those crisp scenes, of violence.
Which is totally not true.
Yeah. So psychic and psychological violence is much more interesting to me.
Yeah.
Than physical violence, but then that that violence, the psychological violence, leads to the physical violence. So I feel like I wanted to reflect the world that we live in. The world is violent. I wanted to make a very strong connection between the sort of civilized world of Delhi that Neda and
Right.
Sunny are operating in, but the land in UP that feeds that wealth in Delhi, and that land is violent.
Yeah.
And that was important to me. So it's an inescapable reality of the world that I'm writing about. I'm not going to shy away from writing it.
I run into that a lot, particularly with Western critics. It's just me being nice, a nice way of saying white critics, where there's this idea of one restraint as a value, and I've always thought it's not restraint; it's just failure of nerve.
Yeah.
And I think also that violence is violent,
Yeah.
and it's supposed to be, and if it's not disturbing you, then it's not effective as a scene. And I thought about that because, especially when reading your book, because it made me figure, oh, I wasn't crazy then, with some of the stuff that I write, because it's one. I know for me, I am interested in what harm does to bodies. And I'm also interested in, the aftermath of so on, like suffering and so on, and these things. It's funny. I remember I was on an interview, and it didn't air, so I know I struck a nerve. It was this interview, and it was the same old thing. They asked me, why is the book so violent, blah, 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 and so on. And I usually explain it, but then I shot down the question back at the interviewer. I was like, why are you acting like you don't dig violence? You're totally into it.
Yeah.
So, we were watching, say, Superman. Superman is attacking Zod in Metropolis, a city with nearly 20 million people. We're supposed to accept that they evacuated everybody in 15 seconds.
Yeah.
No, Superman killed a couple million people, and so on. And there's this, or James Bond or John Wick.
Yeah.
And they will kill dozens of people, walk off into the sunset, and we're fine with it.
Yeah.
We're like, what happened to, a lot of brothers, fathers, sisters, so on died. And so, get into that there is an idea that violence, if you're going to write it, should be bloodless, or we shouldn't see the cost of it. And the thing is, and one of the things I like about your book is that somebody pays. It's not always the person who inflicts the violence who pays for it, though.
Yeah.
Which is kind of how it works in these worlds and the countries and the societies we write about. And then the third part of that little trilogy, of course, of that triumvirate is politics.
Yeah.
And did you know that eventually the novel would have to veer into politics?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that it was always, it was implicit in the first page itself. because you have just the politics of this young man going to jail, and then first being treated like a common criminal, and then realizing, wait a minute, he's connected to a powerful family, and he gets protection, and then you want to know why.
Right.
Like, I wanted to show all the glamour and the glitz and the luxury of this world, because I was also part of it in a very adjacent way.
Right.
And then there's an accounting, as you called the consequences. It's very important that I then go to that foundation of that luxury. It's based on extreme inequality. It's based on suffering. There's someone who's always paying the price for those glamorous nights.
Right.
And the violence is very interesting because, I mean, I couldn't even imagine having this world and not having people who are doing, violent acts to each other, because that just does happen all the time.
Right.
And I've been thinking a lot about there's been Americans and white people who are upset with the way the third act of the novel unfolds,
Right.
because you have suddenly this character come in and he's basically a psychopath,
Yeah.
and he's gleefully telling his story, and they just want more of Ajay. They want sweet, innocent Ajay, and for me it was really important to be like, yes, the most valued, cherished, identifiable character will go, and you'll be left with the worst, because that's really the world we live in.
Yeah. Yeah, but I also thought when I got to that section, I remember it. And I remember thinking, oh, wait, okay, where is this going? Where is this going? I've told her this story, and I can't repeat what I exactly said because I'll be banned from this festival.
You can tell him.
No. I already got into trouble here before.
Okay.
And I remember thinking, because I was reading it on the beach, and I was telling my partner, wow, I think this book just skidded off the rails.
Yeah.
And it's gone in this direction, it's going, and it's skidding, and it's skidding, and it's skidding, and it's skidding. And then it skids into the most perfect plot twist I've ever read. And I said a word I will not repeat on the stage, but I said, but the thing about it, though, that I thought of, and this may also be in a response to certain ways in which Western critics read the book, is that it's a very non-Western way of telling a story. Like, if you read Indian stories, if you read a lot of Chinese stories and African stories, you expect digressions. You expect a character to show up in the third act who becomes super important.
Yeah.
Or we stop the book because we're going to talk about flowers.
Yeah.
Or so on.
Right.
And it's a very I don't know how much of it was that is just, you're not writing a Western book.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even think at that point of time that I'm going to suddenly. They want that neat, contained story where you have the hero's journey, which is Ajay.
Yeah.
And I was thinking of this yesterday. What if I did this with Ajay, that he does a prison break, and then he goes to Varanasi to rescue his sister from the brothel, and you don't, you're not going to actually talk about the violence, but you show his journey. Everyone would have adored it.
Yeah.
It would have been the perfect novel.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I just couldn't do that. I mean, I didn't even think about doing that.
No.
Because it has to reflect this instability, drama, danger, thrills. All of that is. I'm not interested in creating that perfect story.
I remember saying once, another thing I got into flack for, that every writer of color knows how to write a critically acclaimed novel.
Yeah.
And which is not necessarily novels aren't acclaimed, but we know there's certain kind of concepts and conceits that a lot of writers or a lot of reviewers check off as this is what we want.
Right.
Like people even decide this is what we want from an Indian novel. This is what we want. We want lush beauty and quietly observed suffering.
Yeah.
Basically. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a few years back. I met an old English couple on holiday, and they asked me.
I know where this is going.
No, they asked me the title of my novel, so I said, "Well, it's Age of Vice," and they were like, Age of Rice? Wow. And then immediately I could see the lady imagining, because they were big. They went to Sri Lanka every year.
Oh, yeah, they have a 1,000-page novel in their head already.
Yeah. It's 3 generations on a rice plantation in South India, discussing their lives. There's forbidden romance. There's lives, there's loves, there's conflict and struggle. And by the end of it, you're filled with this deep sense of how, India or the East is just so lush and exotic and beautiful. And there's
we all have tea.
Yeah, well, yes.
And ultimately, I mean, when we're talking certainly about African American lit, we talk about the white gaze or whatever that might mean, but also that ultimately you have to write the novel that's in your head should be the thing that comes down on the page, as opposed to what people expect it is. Did you at any time find yourself worrying about have this idea about what this novel should be that kind of was against what was really in your heart that you want to write?
No, I never. If I start to worry about that, I don't think I'll be able to write. The only thing I have to worry about is like the voices in my head and all the, by the end there was so much going on.
Right.
And I used to have these tension headaches because I had to keep all the world in my head. And it's also about what you know, and you have to translate to the page because you know everything. You want to make sure that the reader isn't confused. That is more important than what the novel should be. Just making sure that everything is in place. How do you work? Is that?
Me? I just basically go through fear and paranoia.
Yeah.
And trying to figure it out and just, I get to the point where I'll just say, you know what, I'll leave it in until my editor takes it out.
Right. Okay.
And it usually.
So you trust your editor?
Yeah, more than I trust myself.
Okay.
And so far, it works.
Do you make notes? Because
I make tons of notes.
Do you look at them?
No.
Same. Yeah. I make so many notes, and they're all over. And then I think the idea of note-taking is that in one day, if, they're like captives on the page, and they're screaming from the dungeons, and if the wind is right, I'll hear them.
Yeah.
And that's it. But otherwise, I never go back to the notes.
I think I use it to just clear my head.
Yeah.
Because I just can't handle more than 2 thoughts in my head at once.
Yeah.
And sometimes, making those notes is figuring it out. But you're right, I never go back to them.
Yeah. I'm glad you say that because I'm always guilty about the fact that I don't look at my notes enough. Yeah. And I'm missing something out.
I'm like, at least I make them.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I mean, leave it for the next novel, for my biographer or something. Then, the other thing that happens, though, with novels like yours and novels like ours is then people go, are you making a statement about India?
Oh. Yeah. I'm telling a story about India.
Yeah.
I'm not telling the story. I say that.
Nobody thinks The Godfather is a story about Italy.
Yeah. I mean, it's a story about capitalism and America.
Yeah.
And I think that Age of Vice is also a story of capitalism and crony capitalism and the social implications of the economic liberalization that started in the 90s. So we've had 30 years of a so-called modern vision for India and what all has happened and how has that affected everyone. So that's what I was more interested in doing. But it was through the eyes of the characters. I mean, there are themes that you can draw out when you read the novel, and that's for other people, not for me.
Yeah. When we exchange emails, we were talking about things we like in novels, like weirdness. What does that mean for you? What's weird about this?
Just the digressions. I'm always interested in that. There's this tension between the world, like reality, and that there's always something going on in beneath.
Right.
And I'm really influenced by David Lynch.
Yeah.
I love I'm just, by the fact that you start a film, and you think it's ostensibly about, we're going to try and find out who the killer of Laura Palmer is, but then it goes off.
Right.
And as you said, we've been talking about this. This is just, I think, your influence is what you read. They seep into your work, what you watch, what you're interested in, and I've always been interested in just strange writers,
Right.
strange films. Yeah, just not, just not being too straight.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's how you are as well.
Yeah, although strange for me can be a lot of things. Like I remember I was trying to get in the mind of this criminal person, spending one day with him, and actually the inspiration was Mrs. Dalloway.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And weirdly enough, getting the cut flowers herself, even though the guy was right about to kill an entire room of people. Just to show your
Yeah.
influences go. But it's because I remember the first time I read Gabriel Garcia Marquez and Salman Rushdie,
Yeah.
and just the whole idea of I actually didn't know you could do that
Yeah.
in stories, and I didn't know you could bend storytelling in such a way. Although I'm sure both of them would say they're just doing what they learned from Arabian Nights.
Right. Yeah.
And we've always had these different ways of telling a story.
Yeah.
I shouldn't even ask, but I'm going to ask anyway. Who you think you're going to start with in the next one?
Oh, I'm starting with Ajay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
I
then
kind of figured, but
yeah. But and then I'm Neda. Well, actually, I'm technically starting with Neda, but then it goes to Ajay pretty quickly. But you know how these things change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would be curious about, because one of the things that time plays such a huge role in this first novel, and it goes through literal lifetimes.
Yeah.
If there's a map, one reason why I think Ajay is the soul of it is that it literally kind of maps his time frame.
Yeah, his life.
And I'm wondering, as you go forward, is time also still playing such a role, or is it more immediate, or do you see stuff going decades?
Oh yeah. Time does play. Not decades,
Right.
but a few years. I think it ends in 2008, and then I'm going to start a few years later because I want to see at least what the passage of a few years have done to the lives of the characters.
Right.
And then you start, because if you start immediately after the events, it's just like it doesn't make sense in a way. And then I also want to reflect that India at that current moment,
Right.
where it was 2012, 13. There was things had changed.
Yeah.
And so that's where I'm. And then it's going to keep going. I mean, it's going to be always a few years. I'm not going to just. It's not going to be 1 year in the life.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
I like gaps in a novel. I've always
Yeah.
liked it, and,
Yeah.
and leaps and so on. Craft question: when do you know you're done?
Oh. So 2 answers when you're when your editor is basically sending you frantic emails, trying to call you, and you put your phone off. And actually, I don't know.
No.
I'm always, the ending is always really difficult for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I always know in hindsight. Like
Yeah.
I will know 20 pages after that this book ended 20 pages ago.
Wow.
And I think part of it too is that I don't want to let go of these people, because I actually do get a kind of postpartum depression when I finish a book.
Same. Yeah.
I do miss them terribly, and then I go, oh wait, if I finish a book, I have to join the real world now.
Yeah.
And I'll go back and see that my friends have things like babies.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh crap, all this stuff was happening when I was trying to write this book.
Yeah.
But I also sometimes just, most of my books don't end, they just stop.
Yeah. Same.
Yeah.
And I'm always, I think, criticized for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's always the weird ending criticism that comes, because there's like that certain kind of novel that it's so contained and has the perfect ending. I don't know how to do that.
But I don't think humans have perfect endings,
Yeah.
though. And I think especially novels like yours, where you are so the characters are guiding it so much that's how lives are. Lives don't end; they stop, or they're interrupted, or they change, in profound ways that nobody can go back to.
Yeah. And also when you don't, I don't outline, so if I'm allowing my subconscious to dictate the characters, then that the subconscious is not telling me how to end it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just carry on, and the characters keep living.
Yeah. I remember a question. I'm glad I remember now a question I was going to ask that I almost forgot. Were there any characters that eluded you, that were particularly hard to write?
Oh yeah.
What, all of them?
No. I think trying to imagine the life of a mafia don, Bunty, was hard because he's this mysterious, shadowy figure, and trying to project myself into his mind was difficult.
No.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure I should reveal this. But yeah.
Was Neha the easiest, or is that too easy a question?
Nada was easy because I was basically using my own complicity and compromise. I was dealing with emotions that I can tap into easily. And yeah, Nada was easier than the others. But there's always like bits which are easy and then other bits which are just not.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it's interesting as a woman when I'm writing men, how to make them, what to make. You always, like there's always this argument, or there's a lot of chat and talk about men writing women.
Right.
And I know that you've talked about that
Right.
before, right? Yeah, and it's also about women writing men.
Yeah.
Especially when you're writing violent men. So, yeah.
I remember asking an actress actually who played a man in a role she played Hitler of all people.
Right.
And I asked her, "What did you learn about playing men?" And she says, "What?" She says, "I just needed to learn one thing, and everything fell in place." And so what is it? She says, "Men take up too much space."
Yeah.
And I remember once I was at Starbucks and I was sitting down to write, and I realized I put my book here, laptop here, I had 2 fake drinks here so nobody would disturb me. And I go, "Oh my God, I'm that guy."
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not going to disagree.
All right, we actually have some time for some questions from the audience. I have no idea where the mic is. But we have time for questions, not comments disguised as questions. You know who you are. Somebody's at the back.
Yeah, there's someone there.
Hi, Deepti. My question is, you've taken on very unorthodox and typically masculine subjects, right? Gruesome violence. I don't even know what my question is, but what's the experience like? Any suggestions for, let's say, a man writing something in a woman's context? Similar, right? Interrelation.
Well, I think just, I don't know, I said this somewhere and it got picked up. Like empathy is really important. Basically being able to access feelings of shame, pain, everything. Just being really open and curious and non-judgmental has always helped me. Not only with listening to people's stories, because they end up telling me things that they probably shouldn't, and but just basically projecting myself into, it's deep, wild imagination, empathy, and listening.
Here.
Thank you.
Yeah. First of all, a wonderful conversation. My question is to you.
Put the mic
Marlon.
up too.
Okay. So my question is to you, Marlon. I am a fiction writer, and I once heard you say that writing every novel is like writing a detective novel. So can you expound on that, please?
Well, first I blame my mom, who's a detective. She's 86 and she still calls me with cryptic messages. It's ridiculous. I think I said that novel writing to me is detective work. In the sense that you are trying to solve a mystery. If the mystery, if it's nothing else more than how do your characters work and what makes them tick and why do they want what they want. Yeah, Grace Paley used to say, "Get under the rock of your character's reasoning," and I think that's it for me. Especially my characters who tend to do pretty awful things. I want to, figure out why to a point. I also tell people I'm actually more interested in hows than whys. Like, I don't want to know why you're getting a divorce. I want to know how your marriage fell apart. And I think a lot of times when people, certainly in writing classes, say, I want to know why, what they're really saying is, I want to see how. And I think that's it. I think you have to get very sort of intimate and embarrassingly intimate with your characters. And I think you have to be sort of fearless. But you also have to allow that your characters your characters don't always make the decisions you make. I am continually disappointed in the people I write. Because I'm like, if it's, I remember saying this the very first thing, I've become kind of a broken record in my classes now, because the very first thing I say on the very first is always the same thing. Remember, human beings are the only animals who, even if they know better, won't do better. Yeah. And remember that, and just sort of do it without sort of judging characters, because it's very easy to develop contempt for a character, which is not the same as hating them. I hate a lot of the people I write. I don't have contempt for them, though. And I think you kind of have to, Caitlin Greenwich says this, you kind of have to love your characters, love your monsters into existence. And I think that's it. It's sort of, forgetting you're an author for a second and imagine you're a really nosy reporter or a really nosy detective, and you just have to get the story. I'm not sure where oh, there you go. Mike's coming to you.
Deepti, thank you for a fantastic novel, which I started reading on my way to India and felt like a primer that every visitor should have. And I do admire the way you take the lens away from Ajay, too. But my question, you were a journalist. Dean and Neda were journalists. Journalism doesn't come out well from this story of trying to address the problems of modern urban India. Do you have any hope in journalism? I'm a journalist as well.
Oh no, I think journalists, when they're good journalists, it's such a great noble profession. It's you're informing, you're basically speaking truth to power. You're just doing. I was a terrible journalist. Let me say that first. I wasn't very good at doggedly going and getting the story. But I mean, journalists are also humans, and they're subject to the same frailties as all humans are, and that could be being terrified by various things or being subject to the lure of money and power. I mean, money, influence, power. We all fall prey to those powers. So I think Dean is still a very good journalist. So I think that I wanted to show how, I was writing about corruption. So, I mean, everyone gets implicated. Yeah.
Hi, Marlon. January 20th, 2016, the day that Trump was being inaugurated, I asked you what the future of the novel was in a 144-character universe. 11 minutes later, we weren't quite clear about it. But with 6 years of hindsight, you're back in Jaipur. What is the future of the novel in a social media universe?
I think the future of the novel is, whatever the novel wants to be, honestly. I think that on one hand, we think because of social media that people want things bite-sized. At the same time, Colleen Hoover is selling like 17 books all at the same time. I've heard things like, the big novel is dead or so on. And, I'm always worried. I'm always suspicious when people come with the novel is dead argument. It's as if, the novel survived plague, it survived wars, it survived book burning, it survived exterminations, it survived the persecution of the writers of novels, but we all think the age of irony is going to kill it. You know, the tweet is going to kill it. And I think to even you know sort of venture the idea that is in trouble. It's just that storytelling is in trouble. And Joan Didion is right. We tell stories in order to live. And I think that as long as we want to tell stories, there will be fiction and there will be novels. And I think they will definitely survive us all. I think we have time for a couple more. One more.
Yeah. Hi. So thank you for the session. I had a question which was on a psychological context, since you mentioned about psychological violence and then that grows to be an act. In your book, I think you've talked about forbidden love, right? Or romances that aren't exactly right in that context. So I was a student of psychology before, and what we were taught was a lot of who we have emotions for, a lot of who we are attracted to is based on our psychological impact as a kid also. So, and Freud, I mean, he said that. So, in your context, do you ever think that violence alongside with forbidden love and the choice of forbidden love is sort of a psychological call for help? Or, I don't know if I'm framing it the right way, what I'm trying to ask, but so do you think forbidden love in the context of violence at the end of the day is also an implication of the violence that the person had to endure?
Well, first, just in the context of writing drama, I mean, forbidden love is just a really interesting territory to explore because you're creating tension and drama. And so, yeah, there's that. And secondly, yeah, I think that, I'm not sure I got your question, but I think that who you end up falling in love with or who you're attracted to is very much influenced by your first impressions. I mean, I have a very Freudian view of the subconscious always basically influencing your actions, your decisions, your desires, your dreams, your ambitions. But purely as a novelist, it's really interesting territory to work with. So, yeah, conflict.
Thank you. I think that is it for us.
We'd like to thank Deepti Kapoor and Marlon James for this stellar session. As a token of our appreciation, please accept these scarves from us. I'd like to make a few announcements. Firstly,